John Pierpont Morgan, known as J.P. Morgan, was one of the most influential bankers in American financial history. He played a critical role in shaping the country's economy by managing major mergers and reorganizations in the railroad, steel, and industrial sectors. Additionally, his collaboration with the government during the financial crises of 1893 and 1907 to maintain financial stability established him not only as a wealthy investor but also as an economic authority. For this reason, he was referred to as the banker who saved America. In this video, we will learn about this institution and its contributions to banking, as detailed in our book, A History of Banks. If you want to learn more about financial history, subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the fall of 1907, a severe financial crisis was about to erupt on Wall Street. A stock brokerage firm was at risk of bankruptcy due to the loss of value of Tennessee coal, iron, and railroad company shares it held as collateral. This situation would trigger a chain reaction of panic, leading to the collapse of numerous banks and trust companies. At the time, the United States had neither a central bank nor sufficient treasury funds. The solution rested with the leading figures of the financial world. J.P. Morgan gathered the country's most prominent bankers and trust company presidents in his grand library on Madison Avenue. During the meeting, Morgan closely watched both sides, employing tactics such as locking the door if necessary to force them to reach an agreement. The goal was to create a rescue fund of approximately $25 million and take control of the Tennessee Company to secure the claims of the creditor banks. Ultimately, the bankers agreed. As soon as the news reached the markets, they stabilized and the panic subsided. J.P. Morgan was thus hailed as the man who saved the country. This move went down in history as a masterfully planned operation that both halted the crisis and granted Morgan strategic superiority. If you'd like, let's start from the beginning and tell the story of John Pierpont Morgan. Born on April 17, 1837, in Connecticut to a distinguished family, J.P. Morgan had a long and wealthy history on both his mother's and father's sides. Morgan stood out at a young age for his natural leadership qualities and quickly amassed a fortune by developing commercial relations between England and America. He did not participate in the Civil War but sent soldiers in his place. During this period, he repaired cheap rifles obtained from the government and sold them back to the army at a high profit, earning him criticism for war profiteering. Morgan occasionally engaged in activities that pushed ethical boundaries. His speculation in the gold market drew his father's disapproval, while his long vacations taught him how to escape the stress of work. By 1900, he had become an expert in restructuring and mergers and one of the most powerful figures in the country in the banking, railroad, and steel industries. Railroads played a critical role in the development of trade by connecting the vast territories of the United States. Railway investments, which began in 1827, were dominated by fraudulent entrepreneurs, uninformed investors, and corrupt politicians for 45 years, due to weak government oversight, and there was intense competition in the sector. J.P. Morgan saw this as an opportunity and entered the industry in 1869. Taking an active role in the management of the companies he financed. This strategy became known as Morganization, and Morgan developed a vision for a national transportation network by merging more than 20 railroad companies to increase efficiency. When three major companies needed to merge following the bankruptcy of the West Shore Railroad in 1893, Morgan invited them aboard his yacht, the Corsair, and refused to allow them to disembark until an agreement was reached. This practice became known as the Corsair negotiation method. The economic growth of the Gilded Age was primarily based on high commodity prices. However, in 1893, the collapse of wheat prices and the bursting of asset bubbles around the world plunged the U.S. into a gold rush crisis. Morgan, who met with Democratic President Grover Cleveland, convinced him that gold reserves could run out within hours and that the only solution was to raise $60 million through the sale of special bonds. Once Morgan provided the guarantee, the market would immediately stabilize and an economic collapse would be averted. Although Morgan never disclosed the profits he made from this endeavor, the public believed he had reaped significant gains. Morgan turned his attention to the steel industry after gaining control of the railways, with his ultimate goal being to establish a monopoly in this sector. He agreed to purchase Carnegie Steel for $480 million through Charles Schwab, Carnegie's right-hand man. He then acquired Rockefeller's iron ore mines in Minnesota and his shipping fleet, thereby gaining control of the American iron and steel industry. Although the American economy slowed down from 1905 onwards, the country was able to continue operating without a central bank. However, the 1906 San Francisco earthquake caused a large flow of money to be diverted from New York to the West, causing the market to contract. By the summer of 1907, money was scarce, interest rates were high, and stock prices had fallen by 24% in the first 9 months of the year. The man who triggered the 1907 crisis was Augustus Heinze, a copper magnate with a penchant for risky ventures. Together with his brother Otto, he took a short position in United Copper shares. However, misreading the market, they caused the price of the shares they had pushed up from $39 to $60 to plummet to $10. This collapse led to the bankruptcy of both their brokerage firms and their banks in Montana. Panic spread rapidly, loans dried up, interest rates soared to 70%, and stock prices plummeted to levels not seen since 1900. Even the primary trusts were struggling to make payments. While President Roosevelt was hunting, experienced banker JPMorgan stepped in to resolve the crisis. Realizing that it was impossible to save those who had gone bankrupt, he focused on sound institutions. Together with the Treasury Department and major banks, he injected cash into the market. Wealthy individuals such as Rockefeller also supported him. Morgan prevented the stock market from closing early to avoid panic from spreading. However, on November 2, a new threat emerged. The bankruptcy of the brokerage firm Moore and Schley, which had used the Tennessee Coal, Iron and Railroad Company as collateral, created a risk of a significant chain reaction. Morgan proposed that his own company, U.S. Steel, take over the Tennessee Company. As we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, he gathered the bankers in his library in New York and resolved the crisis. Antitrust laws could have blocked this solution, but Morgan traveled to Washington and convinced Roosevelt. When the approval reached New York, the market calmed down. JPMorgan died in his sleep at the age of 76 at the Grand Hotel Plaza in Rome, Italy, during a trip abroad on March 31, 1913. His fortune was worth $69 million at the time, and he was one of the wealthiest men in the country when he died. JPMorgan left behind more than just a massive bank for his heirs. He had an unprecedented impact on the American financial and industrial worlds, laying the foundations for modern practices in banking and corporate mergers and shaping the country's economic structure. Under his leadership, major mergers took place in the railway, steel and energy sectors, and he played a role in stabilizing the market during economic crises, thereby redefining the relationship between the public and private sectors. Additionally, Morgan left a significant legacy in the arts and culture, particularly through the Morgan Library, which houses rare manuscripts, artworks, and book collections, ensuring that this cultural heritage is passed on to future generations. For more information, please refer to our book A History of Banks. Enjoy reading and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe.